president like has like this special power, like with orders, like certain like orders, he could use his orders or something like that, and then it has to go through like the legislature and stuff like that. But like if he has many people, like many like of his party in Congress, he can't have the power to do it.
Well, the president's commander-in-chief, and so he ultimately is the top authority when it comes to military, so he can direct the military. However, Congress has the power to purse, so he can't really go to war because he has no money to do it. So, yeah, he can sign executive orders and he can do small joint missions, but really Congress has to back him in whatever they do.
So that's all sort of right. I'm impressed by that. That's sort of right. Since the end of World War II, we've been in 4 major wars and 7 major conflicts and never declared war once. How does that happen? Well, it turns out that Congress, the representatives of the people, do not have a backbone. So in 1973, they passed a law called the Presidential War Powers Act. And that law says that the commander-in-chief, who can't declare war but can lead the troops into battle, well, they never lead the troops into battle, but can send the troops into battle, can send troops into harm's way. He's got 48 hours, or she, when we have a female, will have 48 hours to go to Congress and to explain why they've been sent into harm's way. And they can stay in harm's way for 60 days, after which time Congress needs to be convinced that the prosecution of whatever the engagement is justified, or Congress has the right to withdraw the funding. And then there'll be a 30-day period where you withdraw the troops from combat. Congress will never not financially support our troops that are in harm's way. They don't want the political fallout from that. So in essence, the president has become the de facto commander-in-chief who can declare war. 7 major engagements, 4 wars. The Korean conflict was supposedly a UN declaration. Vietnam was supposedly the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. Iraq 1 and Iraq 2 were UN, and we joined the UN and we went into battle with them. And then we have 7 major engagements from Lebanon, Kosovo, Grenada, 7 of them, and never once declared war. Nevertheless, St. Thomas says you need to have the legitimate authority. Well, in essence, we have 2 legitimate authorities, don't we? We have one that's in the Constitution, and we also have the President, by law, Presidential Law Powers Act, War Powers Act, I mean, 1973. So as long as one of these 2 puts us in combat, technically we followed St. Aquinas' rule. Now, you also need a just cause. What's a just cause? You have a right to defend yourself if you've been attacked. And you also need a rightful intention. What's your intention in going to war? To defeat your enemy. So if you have these 3 conditions, rightful authority to declare war, just cause, self-defense, rightful intention to defeat the enemy, jus ad bellum, you can go to war. Jus in bello, how do we prosecute, how do we fight the war? Jus post bellum, how do we get out of the war? And that's called just war theory. Nuts and bolts, you can see that on your quiz. Questions? And Michael Walter will help you out. He won't give you this, but he will help you out with it, okay? Okay. Well, since 9/11, things have changed. Articulated by President George W. Bush. By the way, he's not the first one who did preemptive war. We've been in 7 major engagements, have not been attacked. By the way, does anyone know after the Revolutionary War when the next time was? We've been attacked 3 times since the Revolutionary War. Anybody know? No, that was internal. Go ahead.
It wasn't the one with World War II for Japan?
Technically, technically we weren't attacked because Hawaii was not part of the country. They were a protectorate.
Oh.
But that's okay. So in 1812, yes? 9/11 was the last time we were attacked. No, they owned the land, and we beat them, and we took the land, and they kept the titles. In Texas, it was interesting. You go 200 miles north, and you buy property. It's all in Spanish. It's all Mexicans' titles. So we won the war, and they kept the title to the land. But it was their land. So yeah, we went to war with them, but.
The French and Indian War.
The French and Indian War, no, but that's not that too far off. Not too far off. In 1812, the British decided they hadn't had enough, so they came back and they literally burnt Washington to the ground. They wiped it out. They torched it, and then we defeated them. And then in 1993, we were attacked in 1993. It was the Blind Sheikh. He loaded up a 6,000-pound cargo van with C4. C4 is very, very violent explosive. And he put it in the basement of Tower 3 and blew it up. And he wounded 1,040 people, and I think he killed maybe a couple of dozen people. But it didn't bring the tower down. You know what they learned from that? Bigger bomb. Much bigger bomb. A jumbo jet filled with, I don't know, was it JP-11 these days or 7, whatever it is flight fuel. Very explosive. Because of 9/11 in 2001, we realized that people who weren't adopting normal military tactics were more than willing to attack us with weapons of mass destruction. They're out there these days. After the end of World War II, after the fall of the Soviet Union, the world really became a chaotic place. In fact, if I were to ask you this, who the most dangerous country in the world is, don't say us. We can be very destructive. Who's the most dangerous country? Russia. They're dangerous, not the most. The answer will surprise you. Go ahead, take a guess. England? China? I have 2 for China, 1 for Russia, 1 for England.
North Korea.
Say again?
North Korea.
They're dangerous too, but they're not the most dangerous. We can wipe them out like that. This is, I had a fellow from India in my class one day, and as soon as I brought this up, he just smiled. I knew right away he knew the answer. It's called Pakistan. Pakistan are the people, well, the country didn't. There's nuclear scientists there, and North Korea said, would you like some cash to share the nuclear secrets with us? And they said, of course we would. I mean, if I offered you cash, would you say no? Would you say no? Would you say no? Just for a few secrets. And once the North Koreans got it, they gave it to the Iranians, and who knows who else has gotten it. So it's not that they're a threat by military force. They're very threatening. They've spread weapons of mass destruction. And let's get this right, too. The most dangerous weapon is not the dirty bomb. I mean, if it goes off in Tampa, we'll all see the cloud, and I suggest you run for cover. But the most dangerous weapons of mass destruction are what we call, I always forget the name of it, weaponized biological and chemical weapons. You put them in little cans of aerosol, sightless, odorless, tasteless. You just walk through the Mall of America, and within minutes people are falling on the ground, blood's coming out of their eyes, their ears, their nose, and they're dead, and people are thrown in a mask. What's going on? Just walking through. The Japanese did that in the Japanese subway system in Tokyo years and years ago. They used, I think it was anthrax and weaponized anthrax or something similar to that. Create total chaos. Put it in the water system, tasteless. Bless you. Before you know it, people are dropping all over the place. So these weapons are available. If you have the cash, you can get them. So what do we do? How do we defend ourselves? I mean, it's not like they show, you know, back in the day the British showed up and they had the red coats on and they had the white thing and they had the big gold buckle that said, shoot me here. You know, I mean, we at least got it right when we came here, you know. The Native Americans taught us how to fight battle. You hide. And you put camouflage on so they can't see you. And you pop out from behind the tree and pow, and then you hide and go, where did that come from? I'm annoyed by the comment, enemy non-combatants, because you don't wear a uniform. If you're my enemy, I don't care if you're dressed in black pajamas and rubber sandals, you're my enemy. So we have an enemy. We acknowledge we have an enemy. How do we defend ourselves? That gives rise to what we call preemptive war. Preemptive wars say if we have intelligence that we're sure is right, we don't have to wait to get hit before we hit them back. You don't have to wait for a dirty nuke to kill 100,000 Americans before we start a war with someone who we know has the means and the will to start a war with us. We have a right to protect ourselves, self-defense. Preemptive war is built upon the understanding that if you have, we call it military actionable evidence, evidence that's real and provable, we have a right to defend ourselves. We don't have to be sucker punched before we strike back. That's what preemptive war says. The problem with preemptive war theory is, what if your information is incorrect? You end up starting a war. And the people you start a war with haven't done anything wrong. We think they've done something wrong. We think they're a threat. It turns out they're not a threat. Well, that's called collateral damage. The price you pay for defending yourself, because we live in a nation now where, or in a world now where people have access to weapons of mass destruction. I mean, think about it. Just a little aerosol can walking through the wall of America. We are at risk. And so we've invented this theory, an additional theory to just war theory, called preemptive war theory. Okay, so we understand that, more nuts and bolts preemptive war. Okay. We also have to deal with terrorism. So I need to make a distinction between war and terrorism. War and terrorism are both violent. And usually the best side that's most violent is going to win the war. And that's why we haven't lost a war in a long time, because we know how to be extremely violent. And we tend to carry the day. Well, then what's the difference between war and terrorism? War is designed to be violent, extremely violent, and to defeat an enemy who's also a military combatant, who's at war with us. Okay? So war is very violent. Most people accept this and consider it justifiable against military combatants if the war can be proven to be justifiable in the first place. Violence would include not only physical death and injury, but also sometimes we speak of violence to intellectual and conceptual ideas. Furthermore, not all situations where physical injury might be involved seem appropriately labeled violence. When we prepare for war, the military always accepts the fact that there's going to be casualties. When I was in the military and over in Europe, we were at a German field. I was with a tank unit, and there was something out there called. Were you in infantry? No. Okay, good. We were with infantry, and they were in something called an APC. Some of them were an armored personnel carrier, and it's in the morning, and we're chatting with them, and we had helicopters that were tank killers, and they'd hide behind trees, pop up. Not really, but I mean, you know, to see how good they could work. And we also had these leftover Phantom 4 jets. They were very popular during the Vietnam War. And one of them was tree hopping, and he got too close to the tree, and the tail hit it. He nosedived, and it turns out he rammed right into the armored personnel carrier. So we're busy talking, and next thing we know, we're listening to scrambled eggs. The pilot's dead, and the 7 men in the APC are dead. You can't survive a crash like that. But we're not in combat, so we accept that war produces violence even in non-military situations, because we're practicing, and when you practice with weapons of war, sometimes they don't work the way they're functioned, or we have failures and lives are cost. Okay, so war is violent. Terrorism, it turns out, is also violent. Now, this is really important that you get this right. When terrorism or terrorists attack a military target, that's an act of war. I don't care what they're dressed in. If you attack a military, that is an act of war. But terrorists also attack civilians. That's why they're called terrorists. So terrorism is defined as the intentional attacking of civilians with the intent to produce terror in the civilian population, so they'll ask their government to stop warring with the terrorists. So we're in Iraq 1, and Spain is one of our allies, and Spain is having an election,